Thrown like trash in the market, the alien market was loud and full of voices and smells from different worlds. Traders shouted prices while straying. Animals screamed from dirty cages, shiny. Goods sparkled in the sunlight, and greedy eyes looked everywhere but in one dark corner of the market near the broken crates and spilled fruit. Something or someone lay curled on the ground like garbage. She had no clothes, no blanket, and no name written on her skin. Her skin was pale and thin with blue marks and bruises all over her. Hair was dirty and tangled like wire, and her eyes looked empty like they had seen too much and now saw nothing at all. A guard near her kicked a can at her and laughed. She didn't move, she didn't cry, she didn't beg. No one knew where she came from. Some said she was from a failed experiment. Others said she was a half-breed thrown out by nobles, but the truth was no one cared. To them, she wasn't even worth one credit. She was trash left behind after a bad deal. The traders didn't even bother to put her in a cage. She just lay there in the open with cold wind passing over her skin. She's not for sale, one trader joked to another. She's not even worth food waste, said the other. She can't breathe, she can't work, and she can't speak. What's the point? A few aliens passed by and glanced at her but walked away fast. Some even laughed and called her names in their own language. The girl just kept staring at nothing. Her body still as a statue. Her ribs showed under her skin, and she looked more bone than flesh. But then something strange happened. A human man stepped into the market. He wore a long brown coat, and his boots were old but clean. He had calm eyes and a quiet walk. He passed by weapons, he passed by food, he passed by gold, and then he stopped right in front of the girl. The guards looked at each other, confused. They expected him to move along like the others, but he didn't. He just stood there looking down at her. And for a long moment, the market sound seemed far away. She noticed him now. Her eyes blinked once slowly, like she didn't believe he was real. She had seen many aliens in her life, but not many humans, and none had ever looked at her with eyes like his, not cold, not cruel, not judging, just soft. The human bent down slowly and took off his coat. He placed it over her shoulders. She flinched hard, expecting pain or commands, but there was none. He didn't touch her skin. He didn't speak. He just covered her body with something warm. From one of the guards walked over, laughing. You want that thing, human? She's not for sale. The human reached into his pocket and pulled out 10 credits. He placed them on the ground near her without a word. The guard blinked. She's not worth 10 credits. You could buy a trained servant for that. The human finally spoke. I don't want a servant. He lifted her up gently like a father carrying a weak child. She didn't fight. She didn't understand, but she didn't resist either. Her body was light and cold. She leaned her face against his chest, and for the first time her eyes closed like she was safe. The market watched in silence. No one stopped him. No one understood him, and the Jun traders laughed behind his back. Humans are strange, they said. Who pays for trash like that? But the girl in the human's arms was no longer just trash. She had a heartbeat. She had breath, and now she had someone who saw her as they disappeared into the crowded street. A soft wind blew through the market, and a single torn piece of cloth from the girl's old life flew into the sky and vanished between the stalls. The market returned to noise and deals, but none would forget the day when someone bought what no one else would. Touch, because on that day trash was seen as treasure by one human, and for the first time in her life she was not alone. The diluent exacted. The wind was cold as the human carried the girl through the narrow streets. She did not speak, she did not cry, she only held tightly to his coat like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Crowds moved around them, some pointed, some whispered, but the human did not stop. He reached his ship parked near them. Edge of the old docking bay. It was not big or shiny, but it was clean and warm. He opened the door and stepped inside. The girl's eyes widened. She had never seen a place like this, lights that didn't flicker, walls without cracks, air that smelled like metal and soap. Instead of blood and rot, he placed her on a padded seat and left the room. She waited quietly, her fingers curled around the thick coat. It smelled like earth and wind and something she didn't know. Safety. The human came back with a cloth and a bowl of warm water. She stared at him, not sure what to do. He sat in front of her, then dipped the cloth and held it out to her. When she didn't move, he gently touched her arm with the cloth, wiping away the dirt and dried blood. She flinched again, but his hand was careful, slow. He didn't pull, he didn't grab, he just cleaned her like she mattered. She blinked fast. Something heavy sat in her chest, a feeling she didn't recognize. After that he gave her food, simple soup. Steam rose from the bowl, and it smelled like nothing she had tasted before. Her hands shook as she lifted the spoon. Her eyes stayed on him, waiting for a shout or a strike, but he said nothing. He just watched, patient. She ate slowly, bite after bite. Her stomach hurt, but it was the kind of hurt that came with eating too fast. After starving too long, he placed a bottle of clean water in front of her. She stared at it, then drank half in one breath. Some of it ran down her chin, but she didn't care. She was alive. Later, he brought her a blanket, soft and thick. He pointed toward the bed, the small side room. She hesitated. Bed, a real bed. She looked at him. He nodded and stepped back. She walked in. Her feet were bare and light. She sat on the edge of the bed, then curled under the blanket and stared at the wall. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't sob, didn't make a sound. She just let them fall. She did not know why, only that for the first time she wasn't scared. The human sat outside looking at a small device in his hand. Her file, no name, no species listed, no history, just a trader's note. Failed product left at Dock 7. No value. He turned the device off and whispered under his breath, they were wrong. The next morning she woke up to silence, not yelling, not pain, just silence and the smell of fresh food. She walked out of the room slowly. He was there making something in a small metal pot. He looked up and smiled. She didn't smile back, not yet, but she didn't run either. He set a bowl on the table and stepped away. She walked to it like a wild creature ready to flee, but she sat and ate. After the meal he handed her small piece of cloth, not a coat, not a blanket, but clothing simple and clean. She looked at it, then at him. He said nothing, didn't turn away, but didn't stare either. She took it and walked back into the room. She changed slowly. Her body was thin, scarred, but when she looked at herself in the mirror, she didn't see a tool or an object. She saw a person, small, quiet, but alive. That evening she found a broken pen and a scrap of paper in the corner. She drew something, a stick figure with long hair, and beside it, another one with a coat. She drew stars above them, then slowly walked to him and handed it to him without speaking. He looked at it, then looked at her and smiled again. She didn't know why, but it made something warm move in her chest. She was not a product, not anymore. She had been bought, but not as a slave, not as a pet. She had been rescued, and though she still didn't know his name or where they were going, she knew one thing: for the first time in her life, she belonged somewhere, not to someone, but somewhere. She belonged to the space between his kindness and her healing. And that was more than she ever dreamed was possible. She didn't know what warmth felt like. The ship floated quietly through space, away from the noise of the market. Inside, everything was calm and still. The alien girl sat on the edge of the soft bed, wrapped in the human's coat. With new clothes under it, she held the coat tightly, like it was part of her body now, something that kept the fear away. Lights in the ship were soft, not too bright, not like the cruel lights in cages. They didn't hurt her eyes. She looked around the small room. Clean walls, a mirror, a small drawer in one corner had a warm light that hummed gently. She walked to the corner and touched the wall. It was warm, not fake heat, not forced heat, real heat, soft and steady like a heartbeat. She pressed her fingers against it, then her cheek. Then her full body leaned into the wall, like it was alive, like it would hold her. The human walked in, holding a warm drink. He paused when he saw her pressed against the wall. She turned around slowly, thinking maybe she had done something wrong, but he just smiled again and placed the cup near the bed, then sat down on the floor across from her. She sat down too, still silent, still unsure, but her eyes stayed on him like she wanted to ask something but didn't know the words. He didn't speak either. He just waited, giving her space. After a while, she looked at the drink. She crawled over and sniffed it. It smelled sweet. She took a small sip. Her eyes widened. Warmth flowed into her chest and her stomach. It was the first time she felt heat on the inside, not from pain, but from something good. The human handed her a new item. It was a soft towel and a small bar of something that smelled fresh. He pointed to the door behind her, a washroom. She didn't understand at first, so he opened the door and showed her how it worked. The room had water, real flowing clean water, and steam. She stepped inside slowly, looking around like it was magic. The human closed the door behind her and left her alone. She stood still for many minutes, then slowly undressed. Her hands shook as she stepped under the water. At first it hurt. The warmth felt too strange, too soft, too kind, but she stayed, letting the water wash away the dirt, the pain, the past. She touched her face, her arms, her legs, and for the first time she saw herself not as a slave, not as a mistake, but as someone who could be new. After the shower, she put on the clean clothes, soft gray fabric that fit her small body. She walked back into the room. Her skin was warm, her hair damp, but her eyes had a new light inside them. The human looked at her and nodded once. No clapping, no words, just understanding. Later she saw a small device on the table. It was a photo screen. She tapped it by accident and a picture appeared. A young girl, not alien, human, smiling, with her hands full of paint. Beside her was the same man, younger, laughing. The alien girl tilted her head. The human walked over and looked too. He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes changed, like a memory had touched him deeply. She pointed to the girl in the photo and raised her eyebrows. He looked at her and whispered one word. Daughter. She nodded, even if she didn't understand the full meaning. She felt it. There was loss in his voice, but also love. That night she drew again. This time she drew 3 figures, one with long hair, one with a coat, and one small smiling figure between them. Holding both hands, she left the drawing on the table and crawled into the bed. As she closed her eyes, she thought about warmth. Not just the kind from fire or blankets, but the kind from looks, from silence, from someone letting you be free in her dreams. That night she was not in a cage. She was not being sold. She was standing in sunlight, and beside her was the human. Not holding her, not dragging her, just standing there and smiling, because sometimes warmth is not something you are given, it's something you grow into. And she had just begun learning to be a person again. The next morning she woke up before the lights turned on. She sat on the bed, holding the same coat close to her chest. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't bring fear, just peace. She touched her arms and felt the smooth fabric of the new clothes. They didn't hurt. They weren't tight or rough. They didn't remind her of cages or collars. She looked around the room again. Everything still felt unreal, like a dream she was afraid to lose. The human was in that kitchen space, boiling something's up. Smell was soft and sweet. He turned as she walked in. She took slow, careful steps. Her bare feet touched the warm floor. Her eyes stayed on him, waiting for a signal, a command, but none came. He pointed at a small table with 2 seats. She walked over and sat. He placed a bowl of food in front of her, then sat across from her and began eating quietly. She copied him, spoon in hand, small bites. No one shouted, no one rushed her after breakfast. He showed her the screen panel on the wall. It had pictures of tools, items, letters. He tapped one. It spoke a word in his language. He tapped again, then looked at her. She understood. It was a learning machine. He wanted to teach her. She looked nervous, but he smiled softly and nodded, so she sat in front of the screen. He sat beside her, not too close, not too far. For the first time, she said something, just a sound, not clear, not strong, but he turned his head quickly. His eyes lit up with surprise. She tried again. This time her voice was louder, not much, but it came from her, a broken word, but her word. He repeated it back, clear and slow. She smiled. It was small and shaky, but it was a real smile. He didn't say anything, just tapped another word on the screen. They did that for hours, word after word, sound after sound, and each time she repeated one, he nodded. She felt something inside grow, like a seed learning how to open. Later he showed her the tool room, wires, screws, panels. He picked up a tool and gave it to her. She held it tight, scared she might drop it, break it, be punished. But instead he opened a small box and showed her the inside, then pointed at a wire, then at the screen again. It showed a picture of the same wire and a word. She repeated it. He smiled. He didn't make her fix anything, not yet. He just wanted her to look, to understand, to feel safe around machines and buttons. Later she sat alone with a marker and paper. She drew again. This time she drew herself standing on a planet with stars above, the human beside her, both with small speech bubbles. Her bubble had one new word: free. She left it on the wall, not hiding it, not afraid. That night she watched him from the hallway. He sat with a small old toy in his hand. Something worn and soft. She walked over and sat beside him. He looked surprised, but happy. She touched the toy then. Looked at him. He nodded slowly and said, "One word." "Sorry." She understood. The toy belonged to the girl in the photo, the one he had lost. His daughter. She gently took the toy and held it to her chest, then gave it back. He didn't cry, but his eyes turned glassy. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Just for a second. But it was enough. The next day she woke up and stood in front of the mirror. Again, this time she didn't just look. She spoke a word, then another. Then smiled. She wasn't property. She wasn't trash. She wasn't forgotten. She was learning, growing, becoming someone new, and all because one human believed she was still a person underneath the silence and scars. Not a machine, not a servant, just someone who had been broken and was now being built again, not with wires but with kindness. The past comes knocking. The stars outside moved slowly as the ship floated in open space. Inside, the walls were warm and calm. The girl now walked without fear. She wore soft clothes. She had a name again, not one given by others, but one she chose. Whispered to herself each night before sleep. The human had placed her drawing on the wall beside the screen. Each day they learned new words. Each night she ate with him. Sometimes they sat in silence. Other times she tried to speak. Not always right, not always strong. But she was trying, and he listened. But peace is never safe for long. It started with a sound, a small beep from the front control panel. The human walked over and checked the screen. His face changed. His fingers moved fast over buttons. The girl watched him, her eyes narrowing. He called her softly. She walked to him. He pointed to the screen. A message was blinking. Bounty alert. Lost property, recovered by unknown. Human vessel, reward, 5,000 credits. Dead or alive. Her heart stopped. The letters were glowing red. She couldn't read them fully, but she knew what they meant. She stepped back. Her hand shook. He looked at her then closed the screen. "It's not your fault," he said quietly. She didn't answer. Her breath was shallow. Stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll handle it," but she shook her head. She had heard those words before. They always came before chains. She turned and ran to the small room. Locked the door. Sat under the table, holding the coat. Tears fell again. But this time they burned. The human stood outside the door, not knocking, just waiting. He didn't shout, didn't demand. He just said, "I didn't take you to hide you. I took you to give you life." Silence. Then hours passed. She didn't come out. Later that night, the ship lights dimmed for rest mode, but he stayed awake, watching radar, preparing tools just in case. She opened the door slowly, her eyes tired, face pale. She walked to him and sat on the floor beside his chair. She didn't say a word, but leaned her head on his leg like a silent answer. She trusted him again. The next day he showed her a map. Safe routes, hidden ports, planets where bounty hunters had no power. She pointed to one far star. He looked at her. "You want to run?" She looked down, then shook her head. "No," she said in a low voice. She pointed to the ship, then tapped her chest. "Here, safe." He nodded, but inside he was worried. 2 days later the ship shook. A loud alarm sounded. A red light flashed. The girl jumped up. The human ran to the front window. 3 small ships were approaching fast. Private hunters. He locked the ship's doors, sent a false signaled to confuse them, but they kept coming. He handed her a headset and a small tool. Hide in the back room, lock it from inside no matter what happens. She held the tool tight, then stepped closer. Her eyes were sharp now, no longer filled with fear. I stay, she said. He looked surprised. She repeated, I stay. Help. He gave her a look of warning, then nodded once. There was no time to argue. They moved together, one to the front system, one to the side panels. She remembered the wires he showed her. Before, her fingers moved fast, sweat ran down her forehead. Then the enemy ships locked on. A blast hit the outside. The lights flickered. She didn't scream. She focused. The human shouted from the control seat, they're trying to dock. She ran to the sidewalk, typed in codes, then cut a wire the human had warned her about. A loud zap hit the wall, but the enemy ship failed to connect. She fell back, breathing hard. The human finished the launch prep, pulled the ship into warp. The stars stretched outside, and the enemies vanished behind them. Silence again, only the sound of her heart pounding. He turned around and saw her sitting on the floor, bruised but alive. He walked over and without a word sat beside her. She looked at him and whispered, not slave, not trash. I fight now. He nodded. You're more than they ever saw. And in that moment she didn't feel like a saved thing anymore. She felt like a person who chose her place beside someone who never treated her like less. A glimpse of the girl inside. Days passed after the attack. The ship stayed hidden in a quiet zone between stars. No signals, no noises, just calm space around them like a soft blanket. She walked through the ship without fear. Now, no longer hiding behind walls. She helped with small repairs. She cleaned wires. She checked systems with careful hands. The human watched her work, proud but silent, letting her grow at her own speed. She spoke more each day, broken words, strange grammar, but she tried. And he listened. Not once did he laugh or correct her harshly. Every mistake was met with patience. Every word built a new bridge inside her mind. One morning, she stood in front of the mirror again. She touched her cheek, smiled softly. Not at the glass, but at the person inside it. She was thinner still, her arms scarred, but her eyes were brighter. Her back stood straighter, and the coat, now hers, was folded neatly on her bed. She didn't need to wear it every hour anymore. She had warmth inside her now. That same day she found a broken panel near the engine room. She remembered the wires, the colors, the way he had shown her before. She knelt down, pulled out a tool, and began to fix it. The human walked in and stopped, watching quietly. She didn't notice him at first. She was humming a tune with no words, just sound. He smiled, a small sound from her, not fear, not pain, just life. When she finished, she turned and saw him. She stood up fast, wiping her hands, worried he might be angry, but he clapped once, slow and gentle. You fixed it, he said. She looked down, then up, and smiled back. That evening, she found an old scarf in a box. It was soft and colorful. She wrapped it around her neck, then sat down with a drawing pad. She drew again, but this time not just two people under stars. She drew ship, her fixing wires, the human cooking food, a small flower in the middle, something alive. She gave it to him quietly. He looked at it for a long time, then taped it beside the others, his wall now full of her. Later that night she walked into the kitchen alone, made a simple soup using what she had Seen him do, it wasn't perfect, too much salt, but he ate it with a smile and asked for seconds. She laughed, a real laugh, short, high, surprised even herself. Then she covered her mouth quickly, afraid, but he just looked at her and laughed too, not loud, just enough to say it's okay. That night, she sat beside the window watching the stars move. He joined her, they said nothing, only watched. Then she whispered, "Before you, I had no dream." He looked at her, waiting. She pointed at the stars, then her chest. "Now dream lives here." He nodded slowly, like those words meant more than anything else she could have said. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small stone from the market. It had no value, no glow, just rough and gray, but she handed it to him. "Gift," she said. He took it gently. "I'll keep it." He placed it in the small box beside the photo of his daughter. The next morning, she braided her hair. Simple but neat. She asked for more words to learn. He gave her a new list. Words like trust, safe, strong. She repeated each one slowly, carefully, owning each sound. Then she asked something new. "Do I have right to name?" He paused, then nodded. She thought for a long time, then said softly, "Lena." He said it once, then again, then smiled. "Lena." It felt real. It felt like hers. She whispered it to herself over and over, like it was magic, and maybe it was, because the girl who had once been trash in a market now had a name, a voice, and a growing fire inside her. She was no longer surviving. She was beginning to live, the choice that changed everything. The stars above were quiet, but not still. The ship moved slowly toward a small green planet. It was a hidden world, safe, peaceful, a place where no one asked questions, a place where the human thought she could live freely. But Lena stood at the front window and didn't smile. She held the scarf in one hand and the old drawing in the other. Her name was real now. Her voice stronger, but her heart was not settled. The human stood behind her. He pointed to the planet. "You can stay here. No bounty hunters, no threats. It's safe." She looked at him, then at her own hands. They were not the hands of a servant anymore. They were the hands of someone who had learned, fought, healed. He smiled and continued, "You can build a new life here. Learn more, grow, be anything you want." She didn't speak for a long time. Then she turned around, walked to the small box beside his chair, opened it slowly. Inside was the photo of his daughter, the toy, and the gray stone she gave him. She placed a new item in it, her old market tag, the metal piece that had once marked her as worthless. Then she looked at him. "I want to stay with you," she said softly. He blinked, surprised. "You don't have to. I didn't rescue you for that. You're free, Lena. You can choose anything." She nodded. "I know. I choose this. I choose you. I choose us." He sat down slowly, trying to understand what she meant. She explained in broken but clear words. "When I was in that market, I was empty. I didn't know what it meant to be alive. You showed me how to speak, how to think, how to feel. You gave me space when I needed it and stood in front of me when I was scared. I want to learn more, but not alone, not anymore." He didn't argue, didn't push. He just looked at her, eyes full of something deep, maybe pride, maybe joy, maybe both. Then the radar beeped again. Signal approaching fast. Not a traitor, not a friend, a final hunter. Someone who had tracked them across galaxies. Someone who believed no slave could ever be free, and that no human had the right To take one, Lena stepped forward, her hands calm, her breath steady. He stood to stop her, but she shook her head. I choose this too. I face them not because I have to, but because I can. Together they powered up the ship. She took her seat beside him, no longer hiding in corners, no longer needing to be told what to do. The enemy ship arrived, its weapons ready, its voice cold over the comms. Return the asset, and we will let you live. Lena stood and replied, no asset here. Just Lena. They fired, the ship shook. But she didn't flinch. She activated the panel she had helped fix, fired the decoy blast, redirected the signal. They danced through space, together, dodging, responding, fighting. As one, the battle didn't last forever, but it was loud and wild and filled with choices, and when it ended, their ship still floated, damaged but whole. She stood in the middle of the room, sweating, exhausted but alive and stronger than ever. The human looked at her. You didn't just survive that, you owned it. She nodded. This is what I choose, not to hide, not to run, but to build something new. Later they reached the green planet. They landed, but only to rest, not to stay. Lena stood on the soft grass and looked at the sky. She picked a flower, smelled it, then let it go. She walked back to the ship, back to her place, not behind the human, but beside him. They lifted off again, not as rescuer and rescued, not as owner and owned, but as something else, a team, a bond, a future. The stars were waiting, and now she was ready to meet them, because the girl who had been left naked and broken in a cold market now had a voice, a choice, and a life of her own, and she would never be trash.